$1 million neighborhood was constructed on land that had been in his family for over a century. However, when Elijah presented a handwritten clause dated 1923, the entire development and every home within it legally reverted to his ownership. Elijah Jackson didn't require an alarm clock. For 30 years, he had woken naturally just before sunrise, made his coffee, and walked out to the back porch of his father's old farmhouse near Opelika, Alabama. From that quiet wooden deck, he had a clear view across the southern field, the very field where his great-grandfather Otis grew sweet potatoes in the 1930s, and where Elijah's own children had once played in the tall grass. But that morning, something was amiss. The ground felt altered. It trembled. Elijah peered into the distance. Beyond the trees, past the fence line, plumes of red dirt rose into the sky. The machinery was present, heavy, loud, and incongruous. He placed his coffee down and headed towards the sound. Reaching the ridge, he halted, stunned. 3 bulldozers were visible. Behind them, construction teams in hard hats and neon vests were marking the ground with flags, as if claiming it was unclaimed land. But it wasn't. He quickened his pace, the Georgia clay swirling up around his boots. "Hey," he called. A woman in a light gray blazer turned toward him, sunglasses and a clipboard in hand. She seemed out of place in a field. She appeared someone who had never worn work boots. "Can I assist you, sir?" she inquired, her voice suggesting she already anticipated the response. Elijah surveyed the scene. "What is the purpose of your presence on my land?" Her eyebrow showed little movement. This parcel was approved for residential development under West Haven HOA's expansion permit. "You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" Elijah's voice rose slightly. "My name is Elijah Jackson. That piece of land has been in my family since 1923. It is not for sale. It never has been." The woman held her clipboard up like a shield. "County records indicate this section was listed as unclaimed due to boundary discrepancies during the last zoning update. You are welcome to speak with our legal team, but construction is already underway." Elijah's heart was thumping hard now, but not from fear. "Ma'am, that land is not unclaimed. I have walked it every morning since I was 27 years old. My father was born right over that rise. You're building on ground that holds more history than you could encompass with your permits." She offered a polite, empty smile. "Then I suggest you take it up with zoning and planning. We're moving forward." The machines revved louder behind her. Foundations were being dug. Trees that once shaded Elijah's childhood baseball games were now being stripped away root by root. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply turned and walked back towards his house. His pace was slower now. Inside, he went directly to the cabinet above the fireplace. It held old papers, maps, and deeds, dusty and yellowed with age. He recalled his father once saying Otis didn't trust anybody with this land, not even the government. At the time, Elijah had considered it mere paranoia. But as the ground outside was being torn apart, that paranoia felt more like protection. He carefully unfolded the brittle deed and saw it. The faded ink revealed Otis Jackson's name. 88 acres were purchased for $480 in 1923. There were no loans, no banks involved. It was built on sweat, grit, and the unwavering pride of a man determined to leave nothing for anyone else to claim. Elijah settled down. Documents lay before him. A growing unease began in his stomach. Something felt amiss. This wasn't simply a clerical error. He reached for the phone and contacted the Lee County Zoning Office. "I'm calling regarding a construction crew impacting a portion of my property. My name is Elijah Jackson. My family has owned this land for over 100 years. The person I spoke with initially responded with a detached, scripted tone. They stated that if my land was affected by the zoning realignment, I should have received a mail notification. I did not receive any notification. They suggested that notices can occasionally be lost, and then ended the conversation. It was dismissed with that, lost. Potentially, decades of family ownership could be jeopardized by a misplaced envelope. However, Elijah wasn't solely feeling anger. He recalled a story his father had shared with him. Years had passed since Elijah had last touched the old trunk located at the back of the hallway closet. He pulled it out slowly, coughing as dust filled the narrow corridor. His knees cracked as he knelt, unlatching the brass lock. The lid opened with a tired creak. Inside, among black and white photos, funeral programs, and Otis's tarnished railroad watch, was a bundle of paper wrapped in oilcloth, precisely where his father indicated it would be. Elijah was seated on the floor, cross-legged, carefully unrolling the cloth and retrieving a weighty, leather-bound envelope. This was the original deed, the one Otis had kept for himself. Initially, it appeared like any other legal document: printed text, handwritten notes in the margins, a wax seal partially worn. However, concealed roughly midway through the second page, in Otis's faint, cursive writing, was something unexpected. In his own handwriting, squeezed into the margins, a note read, "If any buildings are built on this land without the agreement of the deed holder or their closest relative, those buildings will automatically belong to the deed holder and no payment will be given." This was witnessed and signed on February 2nd, 1923. Elijah blinked. He read it again and again. His hands trembled. He wasn't legally trained, unlike lawyers, but he knew the story behind that clause. It concerned how Otis had distrusted men in suits, particularly landmen. Following a near deception in 1931, where he almost sold half the property for a minimal price, Otis had personally compensated a notary to assist him in drafting what he termed a safeguard impenetrable to any attempt to bypass it. This safeguard wasn't constructed from physical materials like wood or wire. It was comprised of carefully chosen words. Elijah reached for the telephone once more. He contacted Mr. Boone, the local attorney his family had relied on for 3 generations. "I need to show you something," Elijah stated. "It's about the land, about Otis." After 3 hours, Elijah was seated in the worn leather armchair, facing Boone's desk. The lawyer peered through bifocals, carefully examining the document. "Well, he remarked, tapping a knuckle against the clause. "You don't see this kind of thing anymore, but it's clever. If this was notarized and filed with the original deed, it's enforceable." "It is notarized," Elijah said. Otis made absolutely certain of that. Boone nodded. "It's old, yes, but if it's on the record, it's still the law. It might be buried in archives somewhere, but that doesn't make it disappear. So what do I do?" "First," Boone said, pulling a legal pad toward him, "you don't say a word to those developers. Let them build. Every house they finish becomes yours. It wasn't due to your identity, but because of Otis. That man didn't simply leave you land. He left you a carefully constructed snare. A remarkably clever one." Elijah relaxed, feeling the significance of it acutely. He's been prepared to initiate a conflict, enter courtrooms, and navigate bureaucratic hurdles to demonstrate what rightfully belonged to him. But Otis had already handled the struggle. Now, Elijah only needed to wait. Nevertheless, he wasn't foolish. He contacted 2 additional lawyers, just to be certain. One for Montgomery, one for Birmingham. He provided them with scanned copies of the deed, the clause, and the notarization. Both contacted him again within a week. "This is the most secure private property clause I've ever encountered," one stated, "Mr. Jackson. It's as if your great-grandfather constructed a legal landmine." The other remarked, "I've never seen anything like it. As long as you record the construction, everything they build becomes yours. Every nail, every foundation." Consequently, Elijah purchased a drone and employed a professional surveyor. Motion sensor cameras were installed along the southern field's edge. He meticulously documented everything. This included timestamps, recorded footage, ground measurements, copies of sale signs, and open house flyers. Each day, he observed the actions of the West Haven HOA, actions that he believed they should never have taken. They constructed as if they held absolute ownership and marketed as if they had the right to sell. But Elijah understood the truth. And Otis? Otis had anticipated this day for 100 years. If the clause proved to be true, Elijah understood he had a single course of action remaining: to wait. Each morning, shortly after sunrise, Elijah would position himself on the grassy ridge, the the sight of the former barbed wire fence. He would rest against the wooden post that he and his father had set into the ground many years prior, with his arms crossed and a camera around his neck, observing. The land below was undergoing change. Where sweet potatoes once grew and his cousin had broken his leg attempting to ride a makeshift dirt bike, now stood rows of modern homes. The exteriors featured vinyl siding in muted colors, fenced-in backyards, and driveways so smooth they didn't feel like they belonged in the country. It felt like watching someone else rearrange your childhood memories without permission. Roads were paved with names like Sycamore Lane and Sunset Walk. Pretty names, but lacking any history. Light poles were installed, sidewalks were poured, and even a cul-de-sac was added that cut right through the grove where Elijah's mother had planted muscadines. The HOA proceeded quickly. Too quickly. Within a month, foundations were set for 20 homes. Real estate agents began appearing on weekends, conducting open houses and offering guided tours to couples and retirees. Large signs near the front entrance announced, "Now selling," starting at $385,000. Elijah remained silent. He simply observed. He recorded everything. Daily drone footage was recorded. Close-up photos of property markers were taken. Videos documented workers pouring concrete, installing electrical lines, and setting frames. He organized all of this in a folder on his laptop labeled Otis's Revenge. Occasionally, a project manager or a site supervisor noticed him. Sometimes they waved. Once a man with a clipboard called out, "Morning," with forced cheerfulness. Elijah did not reply. His purpose was not to socialize. He was there to observe. Then Jessica arrived. Jessica Brenner. She remained consistently the woman she had always been, clipboard and blazer. Initially, she didn't recognize Elijah upon his reappearance at the Ridge. However, within 3 weeks, she began to acknowledge him. On one occasion, she smiled and called out, "Still watching us, Mr. Jackson?" Elijah responded by raising his camera and photographing her. She did not smile again afterward. New houses appeared rapidly, like weeds spreading. The swift pace was unsettling. One day, there would be bare ground. 3 days elapsed, and the construction reached the stage of a complete frame and roof. By the close of the second month, 32 homes had been framed. Of those, 16 were completed, featuring laid sod and polished front porches ready for weekend viewings. Elijah, however, remained undeterred. He proceeded to the county clerk's office to retrieve the most recent sales records. He observed West Haven's name appearing alongside buyers, with the buyers primarily from out of state, Ohio, Florida, and even some originating from California. He meticulously recorded observations, noting each closing date. He verified the location of each home, confirming its presence within the 88-acre zone. All residences were situated inside Otis's boundary. All of them. He even overheard Jessica one morning, speaking on the phone while walking the site. She said, "Yeah, Phase 1's flying off the market. We're starting Phase 2 next month. No issues on our end. The local guy watching from the Ridge, just some nosy landowner trying to stir up drama. We're clear." Elijah clenched his teeth, but remained silent. She had no idea. He possessed 3 legal opinions supporting his position. He had documented evidence, with timestamps, of construction on the contested land. He had Otis's clause, and crucially, he had time. Allowing them to build wasn't merely a tactic, it was a matter of justice. Each home they finished, every square foot they sold, contributed to a debt they were unaware of accumulating. Elijah had already calculated the figures. If the construction followed the initial plan for all 156 homes, along with the community clubhouse and parkland, the total value of the real estate would approach $70 million. This would be transferred to him. Jessica believed she was developing a neighborhood, but Elijah understood the reality. She was, in effect, expanding his portfolio. However, as the sold signs accumulated, Elijah started questioning how long he could delay the arrival of actual families. The first time Elijah observed children cycling on the newly constructed sidewalks, he experienced a disconcerting sensation in his chest. A profound sadness, not anger nor regret. The children were oblivious. Naturally, they played, circling, chasing, laughing as children do. Their parents watched, enjoying coffee on porches overlooking the Jackson property. This was land Elijah's great-grandfather had cleared manually. A few houses down, a young couple was unpacking boxes. The man waved. Elijah raised his hand a little without knowing why. He was unfamiliar with them. They were unfamiliar with him. The new driveway occupied what had previously been his grandmother's garden. He walked home at a slower pace that day, not due to any need discomfort, but because the anger that had propelled him was beginning to transform into a different feeling. That evening, he was alone in his den, the deed spread out before him, as usual. The clause remained present, tangible, and still his. However, now he saw faces connected to the houses. He recognized people, not suits, not developers. Families were attempting to establish themselves on property they were unaware was not available for purchase. He reached for the telephone and contacted Boone. "I need to discuss something with you," Elijah stated. Boone responded, "I'm listening." Elijah continued, "If I delay until all the houses are completed, the price will increase significantly. However, if I intervene now, I might prevent these people from facing a difficult situation. They've just moved in, Boone. I observed a young girl riding a bicycle with training wheels today." A considerable silence followed. Boone's voice softened. "That presents a difficult ethical decision, Elijah. You are requesting something that is not permissible. It's a personal matter. Legally, you are justified, as Otis confirmed. However, what kind of justice do you seek? I am unwilling to cause harm to these individuals," Elijah stated. "Yet, I do want West Haven to be held accountable. They didn't merely trespass. They obliterated my family's history as if it held no significance. Then perhaps the true inquiry is it possible to inflict pain upon them without harming the people who purchased those homes in good faith?" Elijah rubbed his eyes. "Is it possible?" Boone paused once more. "Gaining their commitment requires careful consideration and meticulous attention to detail. Allow them to actively participate in the process, enabling them to take ownership. Ensure your guidance is clear and impactful, so it resonates even before others become involved." Elijah reclined in his chair. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above him. "I observed someone planting a tree today," he remarked quietly. He appeared pleased, as if envisioning this as their permanent residence. "Perhaps it still could be," Boone responded. "The outcome relies on your actions." That night, Elijah experienced little sleep. He revisited the perimeter of the property, holding a flashlight, observing lights shimmering from windows overlooking the southern field. Within those houses, families were establishing themselves, displaying pictures, preparing meals, and putting children to sleep. He couldn't have been responsible for their losses, yet he couldn't overlook the arrogance of West Haven, Jessica Brenner's dismissive gesture, the unanswered calls from their lawyers, and their disregard for generations, as if constructing on unclaimed territory. Elijah remained motionless for an extended period at the tree line. The wind rustled through the tall grass. He recalled Otis, remembering the nights that man had kept watch on the porch, a shotgun resting across his lap, prepared for any trouble. Otis favored immediate action. However, Elijah valued strategy and carefully considered his options. He resolved to wait until the final brick was in place, not to inflict harm upon the families, but to ensure those who had shown disrespect towards his family faced the complete consequence. And then, he would ensure no one ever forgot the name Otis Jackson, but Elijah understood that patience wouldn't simplify the next phase. It would only make it more significant. The notification arrived by mail, enclosed within a polished invitation featuring gold detailing. "You are cordially invited to the grand opening of West Haven Estates, Phase 2 celebration and ribbon-cutting ceremony. Join us for food, live music, and a look at the future of luxury living in Easter Alabama." Elijah examined the card for a minute before setting it on the kitchen counter beside the deed. The event was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April. At that time, 138 homes were completely built. An additional 18 were undergoing final inspections. The community center had recently opened, featuring a pool, tennis courts, and a marble floor lobby resembling a country club. It was being hailed as the crown jewel of the county, and every inch of it was situated on Jackson land. The night before, Elijah carefully ironed his only suit, the one he wore to church, weddings, and funerals, paying special attention to the cuffs, a detail Otis would have emphasized. He packed a leather folder containing the original deed, the notarized clause, the surveyor's report, photo evidence, and legal opinions. He placed it on the passenger seat with the care one would give a newborn child. As he arrived at the newly paved entrance of West Haven Estates, the morning sun broke through. Banners fluttered in the breeze. A white tent stood on the clubhouse lawn where guests enjoyed champagne and sampled small sandwiches off silver trays. He parked near the back of the lot, concealed from view. No one recognized him. Not yet. From the periphery of the gathering, Elijah observed as Jessica Brenner, wearing a vibrant yellow dress and large sunglasses, approached the podium. Microphones were adjusted. Camera flashes went off. "Welcome," she exclaimed. "Today signifies both the completion of our second phase and the beginning of a promising new era for our community." Applause resonated. The mayor stood beside her. Several county officials, whom Elijah had contacted months prior without receiving a response, were also present. Jessica continued, her voice gaining intensity with each phrase. "Thanks to our exceptional team and the backing of our local government, West Haven is now a home to 156 families and expanding." The string quartet played gently in the background. Elijah moved forward deliberately, the sound of his shoes on the gravel noticeable. Jessica looked towards him, but showed no reaction. Not yet. He raised his voice just enough to be heard over the music. "Before you cut that ribbon," he said calmly, and the crowd fell silent, heads turning. Jessica blinked. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice strained. "This is a private event." "I understand precisely what this concerns," Elijah stated. "That is why I am present." The mayor appeared doubtful. "Could you please elaborate on the problem?" Elijah raised a leather folder. "I am Elijah Jackson. My family has held title to this land for more than 100 years, and every house, road, tennis court, and mailbox West Haven constructed sits on property that was never legally theirs." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. Jessica moved away from the podium. "We pursued all legal avenues. A zoning error occurred some time back that you failed to fix," Elijah added, opening the file. "And significantly, this deed from 1923 includes a provision drafted by my great-grandfather. It specifies that any building constructed without permission transfers ownership to the deed's owner." He presented the document. A reporter, standing close, moved to photograph the page. Jessica's expression remained unchanged. "You're attempting to deceive us," she whispered. "That clause is invalid after this length of time." Elijah remained unmoved. "I've had this examined by 3 lawyers. They all concurred. It carries legal weight. This land belongs to me, and everything constructed upon it as well." A man in a gray suit spoke quietly to Jessica. She visibly paled. The mayor cleared his throat. "We might need to suspend the ceremony." Jessica faced Elijah again, her voice now firm. "You observed. You monitored our construction, and you remained silent. I informed you on your initial visit that it was my land," he stated calmly. "I saw you smile, and you called security, instructed me to speak with your legal team. So I did." A gasp came from behind you. It could have been a homeowner or someone else. Reporters were now gathering, with flash bulbs popping and pens writing furiously. Jessica appeared as if she'd swallowed glass. "You'll never get away with this," she whispered. "I don't have to get away with anything," Elijah replied. "You passed the folder to me." He closed it carefully and stepped back. The ceremony was halted. No ribbon was cut. Elijah recognized this as merely the initial stage. The significant repercussions hadn't yet materialized. The following morning, Elijah's phone began ringing before sunrise. An unknown number appeared. He allowed it to proceed to voicemail. Subsequently, it rang again and again. By the afternoon, he had accumulated 12 missed calls for voicemails and 2 emails flagged as urgent from West Haven's legal team. By evening, The local news had broadcast a segment entitled "Man Claims Ownership of Entire HOA Community." Is it legal? The anchor appeared bewildered. Elijah was not. He was at his kitchen table with Boone, examining the deed for what seemed like the 100th time. The wording hadn't changed. The ink remained faded but legible. Boone reclined. They are panicking. They constructed a $1 million project on land they didn't own. You possess every advantage. That night, West Haven's president telephoned directly. Elijah didn't recognize the voice. He had never communicated with the man previously, but he detected the strain. "Mr. Jackson, I believe it is time we consider a resolution. We are keen to resolve this matter swiftly and discreetly. The current media coverage is not beneficial to anyone involved. We are ready to provide you with appropriate compensation for the land's assessed value, alongside a goodwill premium." Elijah didn't react with laughter, though it was evident he was restraining himself. "You're suggesting a payment equivalent to the land's previous worth, prior to the construction of the luxury neighborhood? That's a significant offer. It feels like an offensive proposition." Elijah stated, "You didn't simply relocate Earth. You sold property you didn't own. And now you wish to purchase it at a reduced price after you sold it for millions?" Silence followed, and Elijah could hear the breathing on the other end. Controlled. Stiff. "We could challenge this, Mr. Jackson." "You could." Elijah concurred. "But every home you constructed is already sold. Every buyer now has to question who owns their house. You wish to fight? That will be complicated, costly, and public." Another lengthy pause. "We'll be in touch." The line disconnected. 2 days later, the formal offer arrived via courier. The offer included $4.2 million for the land, a non-disclosure agreement, and a confirmation that Elijah would relinquish all claims to the structures built. Boone reacted with disbelief, nearly choking on his coffee. "I've seen offers disguised as bribes before, but this is exceptional," he remarked, pushing the proposal away. Elijah remained silent, his attention fixed on his neighbor's children using a trampoline recently installed where his grandfather used to park his tractor. He was unwilling to have those children displaced. He was unwilling to have those families hurt. However, he also would not allow West Haven to escape with minimal consequences. Therefore, Elijah prepared a response. He refused the offer, requesting the complete assessed value for each sold home and unsold lot, reduced by a 10% discount for a comprehensive settlement. He pledged not to initiate eviction or repossession, but stipulated that West Haven must cover the legal expenses for each homeowner requiring a revised deed. He insisted on ownership of the community center, parks, and all remaining properties, requesting $61 million. There were no restrictions on speaking publicly, and a public apology was required. Jessica did not contact anyone. Her name was absent from any new official communications, though Elijah received reports. She was reportedly on leave. Some believed she had been dismissed, while others said she resigned. Regardless, the dispute had escalated to the boardroom. During the following 4 weeks, legal representatives from both parties met almost daily. Boone and Simone were seated opposite West Haven's corporate counsel, meticulously negotiating while Elijah largely observed the proceedings. They explored various approaches, proposing a reduced sum, hinting at arbitration, and even implying Elijah had knowingly permitted construction to proceed. Elijah remained composed, stating, "You built on my land. I didn't request it. I cautioned you against it. You disregarded me." Ultimately, West Haven conceded. The concluding agreement was finalized 6 weeks after the unsuccessful ribbon cutting. Elijah's total compensation amounted to $54 million, along with ownership of the community clubhouse, the undeveloped lots, and complete legal authority to oversee the correction of homeowner deeds, ensuring no families were displaced. The settlement was formally revealed at a public press conference. Elijah made brief remarks, expressing gratitude to his great-grandfather for his vision and noting that the past occasionally safeguards the future. He departed quietly, avoiding any media attention or interviews. A desire for tranquility remained. However, Elijah wasn't complete. He needed to ensure Otis's legacy represented something greater than retribution. The funds didn't alter Elijah, not in the anticipated manner. He continued to reside in the familiar house, the aged farmhouse where he'd spent his childhood, where his mother's cooking had permeated the walls with the aroma of fried okra, and where Otis's hammer marks were still evident in the doorframe. He didn't purchase a new truck, didn't relocate to a larger city, didn't install fencing around the land. He did, however, create something tangible. Several months following the agreement, Elijah utilized a segment of the funds, approximately $18 million, to purchase an additional 40-acre parcel of land situated 10 miles east outside the town of Tuskegee. This was land that had remained unclaimed for decades. He designated it the Otis Project. Working alongside local contractors, teachers, and community leaders, Elijah initiated the construction of what he envisioned as a unique neighborhood, designed not for financial gain, but for individuals who had previously been excluded from residing in areas like West Haven. The homes were offered at cost, with mortgage support integrated into the program, and applications were evaluated with empathy rather than relying solely on credit scores. Within the first year, 24 homes were finished, and each was occupied by a family. Individuals from all walks of life, teachers, single parents, factory workers, veterans, were welcomed, regardless of their circumstances. One morning, while standing on the first street of the Otis Project, Elijah observed a group of children playing tag on a front lawn. One little boy sparked a memory of his brother Curtis when they were 7 and too stubborn to wear shoes during summer. Boone arrived later that afternoon, holding a clipboard and a wide grin. "You know what they're calling you in town now," he said. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What?" "The accidental mayor," Boone chuckled. "People say you were given millions, and instead of vanishing, you began constructing front porches." Elijah smiled. Otis didn't nurture hoarders. He cultivated workers. This wasn't merely words. Elijah utilized a portion of the remaining funds to establish a community center in Opelika, offering complimentary tutoring programs, job placement assistance, and a garden where seniors instructed children on cultivating tomatoes that weren't purchased from a grocery store. He also transformed the former West Haven Community Clubhouse, which he now legally owned, into a shared resource center, renaming it Jackson Hall. The tennis courts were made available for complimentary lessons to local young people. The pool offered dedicated swim times for seniors 3 mornings each week. While the Homeowners Association initially disapproved, the homeowners themselves greatly appreciated the changes. Initially, a small number of residents distanced themselves from Elijah, fearing he would seize their homes and viewing him as an adversary. Eventually, they understood that he didn't intend to dismantle what they had established. He simply desired recognition for the work his family had previously undertaken. Now, many approached him directly, seeking information about repairs, suggestions for local services, or guidance on cultivating vegetables in Alabama's challenging red clay. He consistently offered assistance to everyone. "I ain't trying to be a hero," he told a vet, a single mom, and one of the new homeowners. "I simply believe land should never be taken without acknowledging those who labored upon it previously." Yvette nodded. "Well, my son considers you a kind of superhero," Elijah chuckled. "Have you ever seen me attempt to change a flat tire?" He's likely to reconsider quickly. With the commencement of the second year of the Otis Project, Elijah made a final visit to the county archives. This building, where he initially retrieved the original deed, now displayed a framed photograph of Otis Jackson. Below the photo was a plaque that read, "In honor of the man who protected his land so his descendants could protect their community." Elijah stood silently for a moment, then reached into his pocket. He removed a small object wrapped in cloth, Otis's old railroad watch. He carefully set it on the glass counter close to the display. "I always detest being late," Elijah murmured. The sky outside had shifted to that gentle golden hue just prior to sunset, the very shade Otis would often appreciate following a lengthy day in the fields. Elijah smiled, not the smile of a victor, but the smile of one who had fulfilled an obligation. For ultimately, the clause wasn't simply about preventing thieves, it was about ensuring no one overlooked those who preceded them. And now, the land was speaking once more, its voice stronger than the sound of the bulldozers. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing. More stories such as this, authentic, unfiltered, and grounded in truth, are forthcoming. Mr. Braddock, the calculus teacher at Eisenberg High in Elkhart, Indiana, made a light-hearted gesture, singling out the janitor for amusement in front of the class. However, when a man calmly approached the board and solved the problem with unexpected skill, the room fell silent, fundamentally altering the school's perception of him. This occurred during fourth period on a Thursday, a typical day at Eisenberg High where students often watch the clock more than the lesson. Mr. Braddock had a certain reputation. Known for his sharp wit, impatience, and sarcastic remarks, he was a figure who evoked tolerance rather than affection. The classroom felt stale. Equations covered the whiteboard. A subtle scent of eraser dust and old sneakers permeated the air. Phones lay hidden beneath desks. A few students feigned attention, while others gazed out the window. Then, an event occurred, altering the classroom's atmosphere dramatically. While Mr. Braddock wrote another derivative on the board, a quiet squeak drifted in from the hallway. The janitor was close by, mopping just outside the classroom with his characteristic slow, steady pace. Braddock stopped speaking, looked toward the door, and gave a slight smile. Suddenly, he turned to the class and indicated the hallway. "Look who's here," he said. "Tell me, do you think you can solve this one?" He struck the board with his marker, mimicking a game show challenge. A ripple of laughter followed, not loud, but the type that makes you subtly adjust your posture, unsure of its appropriateness. Mr. Braddock smiled knowingly. "Come on, Lamar." Lamar Dorsey, a 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway, holding his mop. The familiar blue uniform, clean but faded, was on him, displaying L. Dorsey embroidered above his chest pocket. He remained still, showing no reaction. His gaze swept across the room. Then, deliberately, he entered. A mop rested against the wall. Several students straightened. Some anticipated a clever remark or a sudden departure. Perhaps a jest or simply a walkout. However, that didn't happen. Instead, Lamar proceeded to the front of the room. "You mind?" he inquired quietly, indicating the board with a gesture. Braddock raised his brows. "Be my guest." Several phones silently emerged from backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he serious?" But nobody interrupted Lamar. He picked up the marker, examined the equation, and paused, not because he was unsure, but as if he were considering something. Intensely, like someone studying a well-known map. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he began to write. There was no theatrics, no embellishment, just careful strokes, one line following another. The room became unnervingly quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the whiteboard and a chair creaking as someone leaned forward. Mr. Braddock crossed his arms, observing intently. His expression remained unchanged, though his jaw tightened. Lamar explained the steps aloud, his voice quiet and patient. "See, this here's a chain rule problem, but the trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate that, it becomes a lot cleaner." He moved with the ease of someone experienced, not just with the problem, but with the teaching. His manner was unassuming and not arrogant. He clarified matters straightforwardly, with clarity, as if he's dedicated more effort to instruction than to menial tasks. Upon completion, he secured the marker and retreated. The board displayed meticulous, well-structured work. He addressed Braddock, then the class. "That's one approach," he stated. And briefly, stillness reigned. A junior student in the rear murmured. He understood it correctly. Mr. Braddock remained silent. Not instantly. His mouth parted a little, but no words emerged. The silence became more pronounced than any joke he could have delivered. Lamar nodded politely and retreated to the door. He gathered his mop. There was no applause, no self-promotion, only that quiet assurance, as if he hadn't just dramatically altered the room. But as Lamar reached for the chalk, no one anticipated what would follow. No one stirred. For a complete 10 seconds, it felt as though the class had been pulled from a dream and placed into something authentic. The sort of moment that doesn't typically occur in a high school classroom. Lamar Dorsey, known as Mr. Dorsey, was in the process of leaving when a comment was made. Had he just thought that? It was Wes Hanley, a senior seated in the front row, who rarely spoke unless it concerned academic performance. He was completely serious. His eyes were wide with surprise. He glanced back at the board, as if a solution might have altered during a brief moment of closure. Braddock then spoke, his tone even and somewhat annoyed. He acknowledged that Mr. Dorsey had, nonetheless, provided the correct answer. His voice lacked its typical sarcasm. A different feeling seemed present, perhaps confusion, or even something like discomfort. Lamar looked back. "I worked with numbers extensively in the past," he stated, then offered a slight shrug. "They remain with me." Several students chuckled, not directed at him this time, but because the atmosphere was easing. Lamar didn't pause for a reply. He departed, mop in hand, his shoes squeaking quietly down the hallway, as if nothing had occurred. It was as if he hadn't just resolved a complex academic challenge in less than 3 minutes without using a calculator. That's when the phones appeared. Someone had recorded the entire incident. Carly Benson, a junior in the third row, had already begun editing the video before the school bell sounded. In the hallway between classes, the topic of conversation was solely focused on the event. "Did you see Mr. Dorsey?" Braddock's expression. He appeared as if someone had disconnected him. Where did he acquire that knowledge? It was believed he only cleaned floors. By lunchtime, the video appeared on TikTok and then Instagram. It was unedited, simply a shaky view of Lamar's hands working on the board, accompanied by a voice saying, "Yo, he's solving it." The text accompanying the video stated, "Our janitor just outperformed the calculus teacher." Some people found it amusing. Others observed it with disbelief. Nevertheless, the excitement continued to build. In the teacher's lounge, the atmosphere was similarly charged. "Are you suggesting he completed a full derivative chain problem mentally?" inquired Ms. Lin, the physics teacher. She had paused, mid-bite of her sandwich, "And so did he," muttered Mr. Crane, the English teacher. "Didn't use notes. Didn't even pause." It was like muscle memory. Braddock was at the corner table, seemingly grading papers. He remained silent. However, Principal Everett spoke. He had been at the school for 6 years. It was surprising that no one knew he had an academic background. People shook their heads. Few people really knew much about Lamar. He arrived early. He left late. The floors were always clean. Light bulbs rarely failed within a day. The man worked in silence. However, he was no longer simply the man behind the mop. Down the hallway, a group of students waited near the janitor's closet. They weren't there to report a spill or request a broom. They simply wanted to speak with him. One student, a 12-year-old boy holding his geometry book, inquired, "Do you tutor Mr. Dorsey?" Lamar blinked. "I haven't in a long time," he replied. "You should," the boy suggested. That was a kind thing to say. Lamar chuckled, but it wasn't unkind. "I'm simply astonished." During the third period the following day, Braddock's demeanor had changed. He refrained from making jokes. He didn't call on students arbitrarily. He spoke with his gaze directed at the board, his voice more subdued than normal. It wasn't voiced directly, but it was obvious to all. Following the class, Wes approached him. "Mr. Braddock, regarding that incident with Mr. Dorsey yesterday, he employed the very method you demonstrated last week. The chain rule, correct?" Braddock nodded once. "That is correct, only he articulated it more effectively." Braddock remained silent. However, the truly startling aspect wasn't the proposed solution itself. It was what Lamar said following it. Lamar Dorsey hadn't intended to create a disturbance. He generally avoided being the focus of attention. This had been the case since his youth. Consequently, when students began congregating near the maintenance closet simply to converse, or when teachers directed extended glances his way in the hallways, he felt uneasy. He lowered his gaze and continued with his regular activities. Restocking paper towels, repairing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, and cleaning cafeteria tables consumed his time. However, he began to notice a subtle change. There was a perceptible shift in how people regarded him, as if they were attempting to place him within a framework they hadn't previously recognized. This wasn't merely curiosity, it was a mixture of confusion, respect, and perhaps regret. The sensation made him uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Principal Everett requested that he visit the front office. He entered, still wearing his gloves, his uniform slightly damp from cleaning the cafeteria sinks. He took off his cap as a gesture of respect. Everett leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together. "Lamar, may I ask you a question? Do you have experience in education or engineering?" Lamar paused. He glanced downwards briefly, as if revisiting a long-forgotten aspect of himself. "I attended Purdue," he said softly. "Mechanical engineering. Full scholarship." The principal leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You serious?" was Lamar's reply. He had plans. Things got complicated, and for the first time in a long while, he began to recount the story. He'd grown up in Gary, Indiana. A bright young man, he's always been fascinated by how things worked. Motors, pulleys, anything he could take apart and put back together. His mother, Estelle, raised him and his two sisters on her own. She worked overtime at a textile plant and still found time to read to them every night. She held a deep conviction that education offered the sole path to advancement, frequently stating, "Books first, always." She explained that the world might attempt to deny opportunity, but possessing your own key ensured access. Lamar secured that key. He was valedictorian, a winner at the state science fair, and then received a scholarship to Purdue. During his freshman year, he was already tutoring fellow students. Instructors noticed his name on the attendance roster and took note. However, sophomore year brought a life-altering phone call. His mother had collapsed at work. Medical professionals diagnosed her with advanced cancer. When Lamar arrived at the hospital, she was struggling to remain conscious. "I can handle this," she murmured. He disregarded her request and did not return home. He took a semester off from school, then another. He found employment, working in a warehouse and doing overnight shifts at a grocery store. He worked to cover expenses. Academic pursuits became less important. So did the dream. When his mother died, possessions were disorganized. He lacked a place to return to, lacked funds to complete his degree, and received no communication from a guidance counselor checking on his absence. "I repeatedly thought I would return to school," Lamar told Everett. But one situation led to another. Life doesn't wait for anyone. The principal remained silent. The narrative carried weight, not melodrama. It was simply authentic, the sort of existence one rarely encounters unless actively inquired about. At his residence, Lamar stored his academic records in a box situated beneath his bed. He possessed a faded Purdue sweatshirt, an antique calculator, and a photograph of himself and his mother from orientation day. He had not used any of these items, yet he kept them. Now they were being revisited. That evening, he was seated on the rear steps of his modest apartment complex. The sky was dusky, with a stillness punctuated only by the distant murmur of vehicles. He drank tea from a metal thermos and gazed into the distance. It had been years since he's considered calculus. It had been a while since his last tutoring job, before he left school, and now it reappeared, like a familiar face at his door. But a single choice threatened to undo all his efforts. While in college, Lamar had vowed to take a brief respite, stabilize his family situation, and then complete his education successfully. However, life rarely follows plans, particularly those founded on hope. Following his mother's passing, Lamar went back to Gary, attempting to rebuild. His sisters were still in high school, struggling to manage. Bills accumulated on the counter. The landlord demanded rent, and no one from Purdue contacted him to inquire about his disappearance. He accepted any available work. He worked as a stockroom loader, a janitor at a strip mall, and provided overnight security at a shipping yard. Anything that provided sufficient income to pay the electricity bill. His education receded further and further from his immediate concerns. Initially, he would occasionally contact the university to inquire about reapplying and transferring credits. Forms were sent to him. He completed them. However, he didn't mail them. There was always an obstacle. Then came a critical moment. It occurred in late November. A man named Frank Booker, the owner of a flooring company in South Bend, had offered Lamar consistent employment. "You're capable," he stated. "Don't squander your time sweeping floors. I'll personally train you." Lamar felt hopeful again, having a genuine opportunity. However, the day before his start date, his youngest sister, Alana, was involved in a school altercation. A disagreement that quickly worsened. She had injured someone's nose. Expulsion was threatened. Lamar felt compelled to be present. No one else would support her. Consequently, he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank reassigned the position to another person. And that was the end of it. An opportunity was lost. He relinquished his pursuit of dreams and instead prioritized stability. Years passed indistinctly. He moved from town to town, holding various jobs. He maintained a clean record and avoided legal issues, simply focusing on survival. Quietly. When he reached Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't seeking a fresh start. He simply wanted a reliable income. The school district provided benefits. Summers were peaceful. He accepted the janitor position without hesitation. He found it agreeable in his own way. It was predictable. The work was clean. Students left him undisturbed. Teachers offered polite smiles. He didn't anticipate friendship or belonging. He didn't require it. He remained inconspicuous. He cleaned up messes and vanished before the last bell rang. Yet, numbers remained with him. Occasionally, after successfully completing a math course, he would briefly observe the board. He'd see a formula and mentally solve it. It felt akin to muscle memory, a facet of his mind that remained keen even as other aspects succumbed to the weight of habit. He would return home, prepare a simple supper, grilled fish, brown rice, perhaps some carrots, and peruse a vintage engineering book he stored behind the cereal boxes, just to confirm his abilities. He invariably did. He simply lacked an opportunity to demonstrate them. Then Mr. Braddock addressed him that day. And now, changes were occurring, not only at school, but also within him. He reflected on the students who waited outside his supply closet with questions. He thought about Wes Hamley visiting that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Dorsey, I attempted to solve that same problem. Could you review it for me?" And Lamar had, with care, methodically. He clarified where Wes had made a mistake without causing embarrassment. Wes smiled when he finally grasped the concept. It wasn't solely a matter of pride. It was about a sense of belonging. That feeling lingered. However, not everyone reacted positively. Braddock, in particular, became unusually reserved. Students observed it. Teachers observed it. The experience of being surpassed by someone he hadn't previously considered a significant figure in front of his class clearly affected him. He didn't respond aggressively. Instead, his responses became more abrupt, his tolerance diminished. Any mention of Lamar in the lounge was swiftly redirected. He was not accustomed to being overshadowed, especially not by someone who had been unknown to him until now. But life held one more surprise, and this one brought him back to mathematics. The video didn't remain within Eisenberg High. It spread beyond. It began with a local student page reposting it, accompanied by the caption, "When your janitor turns out to be smarter than your teacher." Then it appeared on a regional education forum. By the weekend, it had spread across state lines. People online were astonished. They weren't mocking Lamar, they were impressed. He explained it with greater clarity than my college professor. Someone should give this man a classroom and a chalkboard, not a mop. It's a reminder that you never know someone's story. By Monday morning, Lamar had no idea any of this was occurring. He didn't use social media. He still had a flip phone. When he arrived at work, the first thing he did was repair a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom, just like he always did on Mondays. But something felt different. Conversations stopped as he passed. Students nodded, not out of duty, but with an unusual sense of respect. Some even smiled, as if meeting him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Dorsey," a girl called out as he neared the library. "You're kind of famous now." Lamar chuckled quietly. However, when he rounded the corner, Wes Hamley was there, accompanied by two other students. One held a calculus book. A problem was indicated, marked in pink. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Wes asked. Lamar looked around, seemingly confused. "You got a free period?" Someone inquired. We made time. And so, in the hallway, surrounded by lockers and science fair posters, Lamar sat down on the floor with three teenagers and guided them through a multivariable equation, step by step, line by line. He didn't lecture them. He engaged with them. It wasn't boisterous or extravagant, but a significant moment unfolded. Further down the hallway, someone recorded the incident. Lamar wasn't informed. He likely would have disapproved. Returning to the office, Principal Everett was speaking with a member of the local school board. Affirming the information, she stated, Lamar Dorsey. He's been with us for 6 years. No, he's not faculty. He's a custodian. She hesitated, then responded, well, I wouldn't describe it as unorthodox. I'd say it was overlooked. Simultaneously, in the teacher's lounge, Braddock was reviewing an email shared by a parent containing a link to the now viral video. He closed the laptop without watching it. That afternoon, Everett called Lamar back in, offered him a seat. Lamar stayed standing. I've got a request from the board, the principal said. They want to know if you'd be interested in running an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run. Lamar didn't answer right away. You'd be paid, of course, Everett added. This isn't about changing your existing responsibilities, but rather expanding them. Reflecting on the skills he still possesses, Lamar glanced at his hands. They were calloused, clean, and worn. I haven't taught in a long time, he stated. You haven't ceased to know, Everett responded. Lamar raised his gaze. There was no strain evident in the man's tone, only a straightforward suggestion. I will consider it, he said. That evening, he retrieved the aged cardboard box from beneath his bed. It contained the Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, and the orientation photo. He hadn't touched it in years. He spread everything out on the table. The paper had yellowed slightly. The edges were curled, but the words remained. That was the nature of knowledge. It didn't fade. It simply waited. He didn't need to become popular online. He didn't care about the views or the comments. But knowing he could still make a difference resonated with him. However, while some were impressed, others were not pleased by his growing recognition. As Lamar gained more recognition, the school environment started to change. This transformation initially manifested in the student body. Those who previously ignored him in the hallways began to greet him. Some even sought his assistance with homework during class breaks. Within 2 weeks, a small group of students had informally established what they termed Dorsey sessions. After school, they would gather in the library, notebooks ready, concentrating as Lamar elucidated ideas with a surprising clarity that everyone acknowledged. Soon, teachers noticed. Ms. Lynn, the physics teacher, was the first to visit the library and observe him assisting the students. You possess a talent, she remarked gently, and it's not limited to calculations. However, not all reactions were positive. Mr. Braddock had remained silent regarding Lamar since the initial event. Within the teacher's lounge, he presented an outward appearance of normalcy. However, his silences betrayed a lingering bitterness. His speech was concise and abrupt. He avoided direct eye contact with Lamar and never referenced calculus. During a parent-teacher meeting, when Lamar's increasing impact on the students was discussed, Braddock stated, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." While seemingly courteous, the underlying tone was unmistakable to everyone present. The principal didn't ignore the situation. He summoned Braddock to his office one morning and explained the issue directly. "I know it was difficult," Everett remarked, "but Lamar didn't shame you. He motivated them," Braddock conceded, adjusting in his chair. "He may lack formal credentials, but he's educated significantly more than we initially understood. And crucially, he's connecting with students in a manner that we haven't been able to." Braddock started to speak, then stopped. There was little to add. Lamar continued with his established schedule. He didn't request an official position. He didn't desire any preferential consideration. However, when Principal Harding suggested a small payment to continue the tutoring sessions, he agreed. The motivation wasn't financial, it simply felt appropriate. Consequently, he began carrying a small binder. Within it were pages of problems, blank worksheets, and notes he'd written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and jot down formulas from memory, sometimes acknowledging a student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D." One afternoon, Carly, the student who filmed the original clip, approached him near the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar paused before replying. "I want to build things. Teach later, maybe, but life had different ideas." Carly responded, handing him a new mechanical pencil. "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." However, beneath this pleasantness, there was underlying tension. Some parents had begun contacting the school. While the response was largely positive, a single, anonymous concern reached the board. The question raised was whether it was appropriate for a janitor to tutor students within the school. Concerns were also voiced regarding his certification and background checks for instruction. Everett addressed the matter promptly. He is a district employee and has not acted inappropriately. It was suggested that if genuine concern was the driver, a direct conversation with me would have occurred. He did not inform Lamar about the complaint. Nevertheless, Lamar sensed a subtle tension present. Some individuals seemed unsure how to perceive him now that he no longer blended into the periphery. Then, one afternoon, Braddock took an unexpected action. He entered the library during one of Lamar's tutoring sessions. He observed silently from a distance as Lamar explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After roughly 10 minutes, he approached. "Do you mind if I sit in?" Braddock inquired. Lamar looked up. His expression remained unchanged. He gestured toward a chair. The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Braddock smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day, saying little, but it was a start. Lamar Dorsey wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Lamar Dorsey, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't seek recognition. He simply showed up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he once was. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Lamar walked students through math problems they once feared. Not because he possessed all the answers, but because he helped them believe they could discover those answers themselves. That's what mattered. Isaiah, a freshman who previously struggled with algebra last semester, is now confidently solving quadratic equations. Tasha, who once disliked math, is now conducting brief study groups on weekends for her cousins, utilizing notes from Lamar. Lamar didn't lecture from the front of the room like a conventional teacher. Instead, he sat alongside his students, engaged in conversation, and posed questions before providing answers. Consequently, an increasing number of teachers began visiting. They weren't there to monitor, but simply to observe his methods. Ms. Lynn inquired about utilizing some of his explanations in her class. Coach Rivera asked if Lamar would assist in establishing a summer preparation group for incoming freshmen. Even Braddock, typically hesitant and prideful, began visiting frequently. While not every day, he visited often enough. He would quietly suggest a couple of additional problems and eventually started offering words of encouragement to the students. The sharpness in his voice lessened. A change occurred within him, softening his demeanor. During one tutoring session, Braddock stayed behind after the students had departed. "You know," he remarked, glancing at the board, "I once believed this position conferred significance upon me. That teaching provided authority." Lamar remained silent. "But you're showing me what it truly involves, consistently being present and ensuring that each moment has value." Lamar simply nodded in agreement. Everyone occasionally strays from their path. He was not one to bear resentment. He had no need to. Principal Everett summoned him again a month later. A suggestion was put forward to establish his sessions as a non-credit elective class next semester, designed for enrichment and to build students' confidence. Everett cautioned that we would need to navigate some administrative processes. Lamar responded, shaking his head gently, and stated that he appreciated the offer but did not require the formal recognition. He preferred to maintain a simple approach, encouraging attendance based on genuine interest rather than a fixed schedule. Everett agreed, nodding, and assured him that they would provide support in any way possible. News of his efforts extended past the school district. A reporter from a local news outlet visited to conduct an interview. Lamar chose to keep his comments brief, avoiding sensationalism and self-promotion. "I'm simply demonstrating what they already possess," he stated. "Sometimes it requires a bit of time to recognize it." In the spring, Eisenberg High held its yearly student showcase, featuring science projects, art displays, and choir performances. In one corner of the gym, a booth called Dorsey's Table showcased student reflections on math, life, and confidence. Many students wrote about how Lamar had helped them discover more about themselves. This wasn't because he provided answers, but because he listened and showed belief. By the end of the night, people had stopped asking, "Is he the janitor?" Instead, they were saying, "That's Mr. Dorsey." He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood near the table, smiled, and expressed gratitude to the students who approached. Afterwards that evening, returning to his apartment, he retrieved the well-worn Purdue sweatshirt from the box beneath his bed. He refrained from wearing it. Instead, he folded it carefully, placed it inside a fresh storage container, and added a file containing student thank you notes alongside it. He understood that legacy isn't defined by positions. It's about the impact you create in others. He didn't require completing school to instruct. He didn't need a degree to guide. He simply needed to be present each day and demonstrate genuine care. And that's precisely what he intended to continue. Thank you for hearing Lamar's story. If it resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone you may have underestimated or someone who offered you support, please subscribe and share it with someone who could benefit from it. Because sometimes the most brilliant intellects reside in the most unassuming environments. A man struck a 53-year-old woman on public transit, mistakenly believing she was alone and vulnerable. He was unaware that her husband held the position of the most respected officer in town. It had been a challenging day, characterized by delays and setbacks. When Vanessa Kirkland arrived at the Blue Line platform in downtown Sacramento, her heels were causing discomfort, her back ached, and she was 2 missed calls behind schedule on her way to the train. The time was approaching 6:15 p.m. The sun had already begun to descend behind the old courthouse building. She looked at her phone, but did not check the notifications. Not tonight. Vanessa was 53, possessing a sharp mind, a warm voice, and consistently wearing her silver-framed glasses and demonstrating patience. She worked as a lead advocate at a nonprofit legal center, experiencing long days, emotionally draining environments, and paperwork that was constant. Nevertheless, she wouldn't trade it. Assisting individuals, particularly families navigating a system they found perplexing or untrustworthy, felt like a duty, not merely a profession. As the train arrived, she boarded and looked for a place to sit. Limited space was available. She located a partially filled row towards the center and settled in with a soft exhale, placing her tote bag next to her. The atmosphere was largely peaceful. Passengers were absorbed in their phones, listening to music or browsing on screens. A teenager in a school hoodie, chewing gum and watching something with the volume a little too high, sat directly across from her. 2 seats to her left, a couple of nurses still in scrubs spoke softly in Spanish. It was nothing out of the ordinary. The train began to move. Vanessa rested her head and breathed out. She considered dinner, likely just leftovers. Perhaps she would reheat that lentil stew, or possibly just cereal and a long bath. Her thoughts wandered. But then a voice arose. It was loud, rapid, and smug. "Excuse me, I'm going to ask you something." She didn't move at first, just opened her eyes slowly. Across the aisle, a man had gotten on at the last stop. Mid-20s, tall, wiry, and loud, wore a sleeveless hoodie and had headphones around his neck. He was looking straight at her, grinning. Vanessa blinked once, didn't say a word. He leaned a little closer. "I'm serious. You're sitting up here as if you're running for mayor." Wearing a complete church ensemble, I observed her. A nearby teenager chuckled softly. The man visibly straightened, seeming to relish the attention. "You must be going somewhere important, ma'am," he stated. She remained silent. Adjusting her glasses, she maintained a dignified posture and subtly turned her head toward the window. However, he wasn't finished. He began pacing with deliberate, measured steps down the aisle, gesturing at various passengers. "People like her," he declared, always act as if they are superior. Sit straight, avert your gaze, and remain silent. It seemed as though others judged us harshly. People began to notice. A woman near the front briefly looked back before quickly averting her gaze. A young man behind Vanessa subtly reached for his phone. Vanessa felt no surge of panic. Years of practice had taught her to remain composed during confrontations. She recognized this behavior, a display of confidence fueled by the desire for attention. A man who felt more powerful when others appeared diminished. She spoke calmly. "You should take a seat." Her voice was even, neither raised nor trembling, simply resolute. The man paused. He paused, appearing hesitant. Then, he tilted his head. "Oh, are you giving orders now? Do you have a badge or something?" Vanessa remained unmoved. "No, but you're embarrassing yourself in front of a train full of strangers." His smile briefly wavered. Then he moved closer, too close. However, the atmosphere in the car shifted. People were observing now, more than previously. There was tension, certainly, but also a sense of anticipation, as if everyone was awaiting the next development. Vanessa remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her hands resting in her lap. He smirked. "You got a mouth on you. Let's see if you talk like that when I'm a little closer." But he didn't know who he was addressing, and he was about to discover that the hard way. The train rattled forward, cutting through the city as if oblivious to the escalating tension inside Car 7. The man, later identified as Kyle Dunham, aged 26, with a record full of petty nonsense, stood inches from Vanessa now. A subtle aroma of malt liquor and mint gum emanated from his breath. He lowered himself, observing her with the gaze of a child studying a motionless doll, anticipating her to break eye contact first. She remained steadfast. "You one of those strong, independent types, huh?" He expectorated. "Always got something smart to say when there's people around to protect you. But you on your own now, sweetheart." Vanessa released a barely perceptible sigh, the kind intended to convey disappointment, not weariness. "I'm not on my own," she stated. Kyle surveyed the surroundings with a flourish. "Oh, who has your back, then?" he called out, raising his voice. "Does anyone among you want to come and save Grandma over here?" He paused. "No, I didn't expect so." The word grandma stung more than he anticipated, not because of her age, but because of the implication behind it. It suggested she was diminished, that women aged and became invisible, useless, laughable, something to ridicule, not to honor. Nevertheless, she remained composed. "You're embarrassing yourself," she stated gently. "That's what bullies do when they are afraid." Kyle appeared startled, freezing in place. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. Vanessa subtly shifted forward, her voice remaining composed. "You mentioned it earlier, on the phone, prior to boarding the train. That was a deception." He denied having done so, but her statement unnerved him, prompting him to question what else she might know. "You're crazy," he mumbled. Vanessa turned back toward the window, not in a dismissive manner, but as if he were insignificant. This was the catalyst. Kyle's pride couldn't withstand the rejection. The audience had fallen silent. His performance was unsuccessful, and a bitter expression tightened his features. "Finish speaking now?" he demanded. "All that talking, and now you're afraid?" Vanessa remained silent, so he gently nudged her shoulder, a clear indication that this was no longer a verbal exchange. A sharp intake of breath came from the rear of the vehicle immediately. Vanessa raised her gaze slowly, maintaining her composure and silence. "Kyle," she stated, "this is your final opportunity to take a seat and depart with some measure of self-respect." Kyle's thoughts had vanished. He was consumed by anger. Humiliated, vulnerable, and needing to regain command, he struck her. The sound was distinct, a smack of skin against skin. Her glasses moved slightly. Her head tilted a little due to the impact. Exclamations arose, escalating into a commotion. People stood up. Phones appeared. A voice called out from the rear. Vanessa simply blinked, then remained still. She carefully straightened her glasses, neatly arranged a strand of hair behind her ear, then fixed her gaze directly upon him. You have just committed a significant error. Kyle hesitated briefly, his hands still raised, his breathing now shallow. Who do you think you are? He asked, his voice softer. She inclined her head. You'll find out soon enough. 2 rows back, the young man who had been quietly recording rose and walked to the rear of the car. He had observed something in her eyes, something unyielding, not fearful. It prompted his movement. A voice murmured, "She's important. I believe she's someone." Another voice followed. "Is that the chief's wife?" "That's the police chief's wife." And now Kyle was hearing the murmur. "What?" he said. No one answered, but the mood in the car shifted. It had gone from outrage to recognition. This wasn't just a woman on a train anymore. This was somebody. Vanessa stayed still. Her cheek stung. Her hand trembled just a little in her lap. But she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached for her phone, opened a text, typed 5 words, "Call me when you can." Sent. She glanced upward, not toward Kyle, but at the doors. The train was 1 stop from Curtis Park Station, and that was the extent of his remaining time. Curtis Park Station was less than 2 minutes away now. But for all those inside the train car, time began to lengthen. No one was speaking anymore. Not genuinely. There were hushed tones, murmurs, yes. But the atmosphere had changed, becoming concentrated and oppressive. Kyle sensed it. He disliked it. He positioned himself in the middle of the aisle, as if he had something yet to demonstrate. His gaze now moved frequently, scanning the passengers who avoided eye contact. He observed those recording, resenting their lack of laughter. They weren't fearful of him, either. Not anymore. "Man, you're tripping," he mumbled. She started it, trying to appear superior. No one reacted. Across from him, Vanessa had repositioned her tote onto her lap. Her fingers were clenched around the straps, her thumb rhythmically stroking a small stitched detail. She felt no fear. However, anger simmered within her. A quiet anger, an anger that held back, an anger that was justified. Her skin still felt hot. The mark of his hand remained visible. She refrained from touching it. Maintaining a composed stance, she kept her shoulders straight. She was aware of the scrutiny, not only from those with phones, but also from the observant individuals who had witnessed similar incidents and felt powerless. Now, their attention was on her, and so was Kyle's. "You think you're better than me," he hissed suddenly. "That's what this is. You people always act like you're too good." Vanessa finally looked at him. Her voice was low. "I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're making choices you're going to regret." "You threatening me?" He shot back. "No," she said. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." The train gave a mechanical groan as it began slowing into Curtis Park. The lights flickered once overhead. Kyle turned toward the door, fidgeting. A woman 2 seats down whispered something to her boyfriend. He nodded subtly, moved his hand into his jacket pocket, a badge, an off-duty officer merely awaiting the signal. And then Kyle turned back one last time. "You ain't nothing but a loudmouth in a skirt," he spat. "Nobody gonna save you." And with that, he reared his hand back again. But this time someone moved. Not Vanessa, not the off-duty cop. A man, tall, with a beard and still wearing a dusty construction vest from work, moved quickly from the rear of the car. He seized Kyle's wrist as he started to swing and pulled it down forcefully. "Try that again, and I'll break your arm," the man stated, his voice calm but menacing. Kyle attempted to free himself, but was unable to. The man's grip was stronger and more resolute. "Finished?" he inquired. Kyle swore, recoiled, and stumbled toward the opposite wall of the train. He appeared like a trapped creature, snarling more from panic than from any sense of dignity. Vanessa rose. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't theatrical. Just even. She surveyed the car, noting the woman with her phone, the young man in the hoodie, the child in the back feigning disinterest. Then she looked at Kyle. "I won't file charges for what you just did," she stated, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "But someone will. Someone invariably does. And when they do, I hope it's recorded." The train emitted a hiss as the doors opened. Curtis Park Station. Light flooded in from the platform. There, on the platform, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, stood Darius Kirkland. He wasn't wearing a uniform. It wasn't necessary. He wore a black button-down shirt and slacks, and his expression was stern and intense. He boarded the train. Silence filled the space. Kyle stared at him, puzzled. Who? Darius spoke, his tone direct. Kyle remained still. Darius advanced one step. Now, a badge appeared, revealed with quiet assurance. The name was visible. Kirkland. Kyle's gaze shifted to Vanessa. An understanding dawned. That name, her. Oh no, he breathed. The off-duty officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. Let's go. I didn't know. Kyle shouted. Yo, I didn't know who she was. Darius said nothing. Vanessa stepped off the train first. She didn't look back. But the man who slapped her would never forget the moment he realized who she was, nor how close he came to losing a lot more than his pride. They walked Kyle off the platform like a child being removed from class for misbehaving. This wasn't a school setting, and no message would be sent home. The train departed behind them. Vanessa maintained a steady, even pace as she walked. Darius walked beside her, mostly silent. He didn't need to speak. His jaw was tense, not with anger, but with controlled composure. Years of policing had shown him the value of knowing when to speak and when silence was more impactful. Behind them, Kyle was guided to a bench close to the platform stairs. He was breathing rapidly, his eyes wide, still processing what had occurred. A plainclothes officer stood close by, observing with little visible emotion. Vanessa reduced her speed and then spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. I'm okay. Darius looked at her, his eyes showing a trace of gentleness for the first time since boarding the train. I know you are, he replied, but I'm not. He hesitated. I saw the entire video before I arrived. The initial message I received was from Naomi Simmons. Do you recall her? From Housing Court? Vanessa gave a single nod. She witnessed the event as it unfolded, communicating it to me in just 4 words. Is this your wife? Vanessa released a sigh that mingled amusement and weary comfort. You should have observed the child in the 3rd row, she remarked. He attempted to disappear the instant that boy began to be noisy, resembling Darren when he would feign sleep to evade tasks. Darius laughed softly. I long for that boy, she acknowledged, her eyes wandering across the platform. Many people on that train likely recognized this scenario. However, this time the events unfolded differently. He touched her shoulder gently. It's because you didn't react, she said. That alters everything. A few yards behind them, Kyle began to fall apart. Not from guilt, not yet, but from fear. The fog lifted, and the man he slapped was standing nearby, shaking hands with law enforcement, while his own hands were held beneath his thighs like a child avoiding reprimand. An officer spoke to him, and his reply was abrupt and overly loud. Darius overheard. I didn't even hit her that hard. He glanced at Vanessa, his expression remaining composed. Do you mind if I handle this? She gave an affirmative nod. I trust you. Darius then proceeded back toward Kyle, his steps deliberate and controlled, as if approaching a speaker's platform rather than a bench. Kyle sat up straighter as he noticed Darius's approach. Yo, look, I didn't know who she was, man. I didn't know she was, married to a cop. I believe she was simply just what? Darius interrupted. Tell me. Kyle's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. Darius sat beside him, maintaining a comfortable distance. You thought she was merely a woman. Alone. An easy target. Kyle's lips tightened, seeking an explanation. She was speaking her mind. No, Darius responded, his voice calm. She was demonstrating composure. That's not a common sight, is it? I didn't harm her in that way, though. You made contact with her. You placed your hands on her. Before an audience. Recorded on camera. And then there was another attempt. Kyle scanned the area, as if searching for support. But the platform was empty. There was no one to assist him. No one ever did for people like Vanessa. That was intentional, Darius stated. You're fortunate because she's extending understanding that others wouldn't. But don't misinterpret that as a sign of vulnerability. Kyle lowered his gaze. His earlier arrogance diminished to a smaller form. The inflated self-assurance had vanished. He appeared more like a boy now, lost, tired, and suddenly very aware of how much worse things could have been. What's going to happen to me? He asked. That depends, Darius said. Right now, you're being detained. There's an outstanding warrant on you for a missed court date from 3 months ago. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Unrelated, but not forgotten. Darius stood up. And later? That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when you walk out of holding. He turned, not waiting for a reply, and returned to Vanessa, who was now seated close to a column, eyes closed in a brief moment of quiet. However, the complete story wasn't finished, and its full impact hadn't completely arrived. At least, not yet. They didn't depart the station immediately. Vanessa had taken a place on the lengthy metal bench beside the wall, sheltered by the weathered Curtis Park sign. She sat straight, legs crossed at the ankle, and her hands were finally relaxed. A stillness had returned, the type often present after a disturbance. Darius stood a short distance away, holding a phone to his ear and speaking softly. Vanessa couldn't discern his words, but she understood his demeanor. It was the voice he employed when rectifying another's blunder. Following a few minutes, he ended the call, approached her, and sat next to her. "They're taking him to county," he stated. "He isn't facing charges yet for the slap. Not unless you request it." Vanessa remained silent for a moment. She wasn't trying to be elusive. She simply needed a short time to consider what was most important. "I won't push," she stated following a brief silence. "Let the warrant take care of it. That's sufficient for now," Darius agreed slowly, nervously biting his lower lip. He acknowledged her fortunate position. They remained seated next to each other. People passed them on the platform, some offering curious looks, some murmuring as they recognized her from the videos already in circulation. Vanessa had experienced widespread online attention previously. However, nothing like this. Typically, the shared content consisted of excerpts from her addresses at city forums or housing events. Previously, a video of her embracing a woman who had recently won a child custody case had garnered thousands of likes. However, this situation was different. Now, she was the woman on the train, and her face, still faintly marked where Kyle's hand had landed, was circulating across timelines and news feeds in real time. She anticipated the consequences: comment sections, opinions, outrage, and debate. Some might describe her as a hero. Others might perceive her as lenient for not responding in kind. Still others would likely seek to place blame. Darius broke the silence. "Remember that speech I gave last week?" He began. "About dignity, public space, and consequence?" She replied, "Yes, I was in the front row." He continued, "I said every citizen deserves to move through their city without fear. That is the baseline, not the luxury." She nodded. He went on, "When I said that, I was thinking about everyone. Children walking to school, grandparents catching the bus, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks. I hadn't been thinking about you," she acknowledged. "I know," she said gently, "and I regret that I hadn't." Vanessa turned to him. "Please don't do that." He lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't have been in that situation." She offered a brief laugh. "Do you believe I haven't faced worse?" His eyes rose. "I've lived 53 years in this skin, Darius. On this earth, in this body. I've been followed, yelled at, disrespected, dismissed, and talked over. It simply so happened they were recorded." He showed no smile. Yet, he seemed to grasp the sentiment. "You've always been stronger than I remarked. "No," she replied. "I'm simply more experienced." A train whistle echoed as a train arrived at the station. A different vehicle, different travelers, the same city. A young woman in scrubs drew near carefully, her gaze shifting between them. "Excuse me, Mrs. Kirkland?" she inquired. Vanessa turned. "Yes, I just wanted to express my gratitude," she said, "for the way you manage him, for maintaining your dignity." Vanessa rose, offered her hand. "What's your name?" Rosa replied, "I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's." "You had a long shift?" Vanessa nodded. "You take care of people all day?" "Thank you." Rosa appeared taken aback by the courtesy. She offered a small nod and departed. Darius rose to stand next to his wife. "Let's go home." But Vanessa didn't move immediately. She glanced around the platform one last time, observing the train tracks, the benches, the signage, and the flow of people as if nothing had occurred. It felt as if time had restarted. "I'll ride the train tomorrow," she stated. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "And the following day? And the day after that?" "I refuse to be silenced simply because someone is unfamiliar with me," Darius said, placing a gentle hand on her back. However, as they departed the station, neither of them realized the extent to which this moment would affect those beyond the train car. This became clear when the news broke. By the time they arrived at their home in Southland Park, Vanessa's phone had received more than 20 notifications. Darius had received a significant influx of communication. Friends, journalists, colleagues, and individuals they hadn't spoken to in years suddenly recalled their contact information. She chose not to respond to most of these inquiries. The incident had already been reported in the local news by 9 p.m. One news source titled their report "Community Leader Assaulted on Light Rail. Suspect Apprehended at Station." Another opted for a more dramatic headline: "Slap on the Train Sparks Debate Over Civility and Race." However, the video clips were the content that spread most rapidly. A 16-second vertical video, filmed by someone sitting 3 rows back, captured Kyle's words. "This is our Lance." It showed the slap and the subsequent moment where she met his gaze, appearing unaffected by his action. Within hours, the video surpassed 100,000 views, then 200, and finally 500,000. Each comment offered an opinion. Some praised her composure, others questioned why no one intervened earlier, and predictably, some found fault. Daria was sitting on the bed's edge, looking at news articles, her jaw tight. Vanessa entered from the bathroom, her face freshly washed and her hair wrapped. "You should put that away," Vanessa said. Daria looked up. "I keep reading these comments. People analyzing what you should have said, what you didn't say. It's as if you were putting on a show. That's the internet." Daria replied, "I simply dislike seeing you transformed into a symbol." Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. "That has been occurring since I was 13 years old. The first instance I experienced being followed in a drugstore simply for wearing lip gloss marked a turning point." Daria sighed. "I know. I only wanted you to find some quiet." "I have quiet," she replied, "and I still do. That boy didn't deprive me of anything. In fact, he provided a space for me to express what I've always felt." He looked at her, pausing. "That regardless of your identity, respect isn't gained through increased volume or physical force. It's demonstrated by how you regard those who are not indebted to you." She positioned herself beside him, carefully taking the phone from his grasp and placing it on the nightstand. "You recall what you told the academy class last spring?" she inquired. "Which part?" He responded, "We don't train for revenge. We train for response." Darius chuckled softly. "I borrowed that line from my grandfather." "Well, you gave it meaning," she replied. "It's the same reason I refrained from reacting with force today. You address situations as they arise, not according to others' expectations, but as they require." A pause. "Did you see how many people were watching?" She continued. "If I had lost control, it wouldn't have been about him anymore. It would have become a completely different situation." Darius nodded slowly. "You are correct." At that moment, a new message appeared on Vanessa's phone. This one was not from the press. It was from a mother of a high school student she'd represented 6 months earlier in a school discrimination case. She had defended him after he'd been suspended for what proved to be a false accusation by a teacher. The message stated, "My son saw the video and said, 'That's Miss Kirkland. She's real. I just want you to know how much you matter to people like us. Thank you for being who you are.'" Vanessa looked at the message for a long moment. Then she gave the phone to Darius silently. He read it, exhaled, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile. "You matter," he said. "So do you," she replied. The following morning, while they were seated together on the porch enjoying coffee, a news van leisurely drove down the street. The vehicle didn't halt, but the camera within directed its view towards the house before proceeding onward. "I suspect today will be more eventful than anticipated," he remarked. "I believe every day is," Vanessa replied. She rose, stretched, and retrieved her tote bag near the door. "Are you going out?" he asked. "Yes. They require my presence at the center. We have eviction hearings scheduled for this week. I will not be absent due to someone being unable to accept a woman speaking directly." Darius also rose. "Desire a lift?" She offered a smile. "No, I will travel by train." She observed her intently for a moment. "Are you certain?" "I want to be visible. Identical seat, identical time. Because I'm not the one who requires anonymity." However, as Vanessa resumed her schedule, the events that transpired on that train continued to resonate far beyond the station, impacting dinner conversations, classrooms, news organizations, and homes throughout the nation. Following those initial moments, video recordings of Vanessa Kirkland were shared across newsrooms, courtrooms, break rooms, and barbershops. The incident generated discussion in locations that seldom addressed individuals like her, middle-aged, black, composed during pressure, unaffected by disorder. Podcasts featured it. Community forums offered perspectives. National broadcasters attempted to contextualize it, as though it conformed to a predetermined narrative concerning race, gender, and power. However, the situation defied easy categorization. That was its compelling quality. Despite everything, Vanessa consistently took the same train, often securing the same seat when available. Whenever someone recognized her, they would offer a nod or a quiet expression of gratitude. On one occasion, an elderly gentleman approached her to simply state, "I witnessed what occurred. I'm showing my granddaughter." I told her, this is how one maintains composure during a crisis. Vanessa, however, wasn't seeking acknowledgement. That's what made her actions so meaningful. She had navigated hardships previously. The difference was that the world hadn't been documenting it. The city organized a public forum 2 weeks later. Community safety, transportation, and law enforcement relations were the focus of the meeting. The hall was full. Darius was invited to speak. Attendees anticipated a discussion about crime statistics and updated patrol approaches. However, he chose to recount the story of the train. "I wasn't present at the beginning," he stated from the podium. "I wasn't seated beside her. I didn't observe the expression in his gaze or the stillness with which she remained while others spoke. But I was present when it concluded, and what I witnessed extended beyond my wife." He embodied restraint, strength, and a level of control that most of us only discuss in theory. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Her actions transcended mere self-preservation. She demonstrated that standing your ground doesn't always require physical force. Sometimes it involves maintaining composure when someone is attempting to undermine you. Vanessa remained silent that evening. She was seated in the second row, wearing a navy blazer and black slacks, her hands resting in her lap. Observing, hearing, understanding. Afterward, as they headed back to the vehicle, a young reporter stepped forward. He appeared apprehensive, holding a microphone in one hand and a phone in the other. "Mrs. Kirkland," he began, "do you believe you represent something, given what transpired?" She regarded him. "I am not a symbol," she replied. "I am a woman. I was weary. I was on the train, returning home, and someone believed that entitled them to behave as though I lacked significance, but the manner in which it was addressed. Many are describing it as impactful." She remained composed. "What's impactful," she stated, "is learning how to maintain your composure in a world that persistently attempts to disrupt it." He began to pose another inquiry, but she raised her hand subtly. "That is all," she responded. "Have a good evening." She and Darius departed into the night, and the story, though no longer dominating news coverage, persisted. It resonated in discussions among friends, in classrooms, when instructors utilized it as a practical example. Reflecting on the events, many recalled the emotions they felt witnessing it, prompting introspection about their own responses, their own stillness, and their own sense of self-respect. Kyle Dunham appeared in court 3 days following his arrest. The court referenced his previous charges and imposed a 30-day detention while awaiting further investigation. Vanessa did not attend the court proceedings, stating that she had already expressed what she needed to. The legal center where she worked experienced an increase in support following the incident. Financial support arrived, and individuals registered to volunteer. A few referenced the video, but the majority expressed a desire to contribute to something impactful without needing fanfare. Vanessa Kirkland, in particular, continued her daily train journeys. That train, for better or worse, evolved into a visible representation of dignity in action. In a world often filled with distractions, individuals such as Vanessa Kirkland serve as a reminder of a truth that is often overlooked. True resilience isn't always loud. Occasionally, it remains still, speaks with composure, and stands firm. This isn't driven by a desire to triumph, but a determination to remain present. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted reflection, or evoked thoughts of someone familiar, please share it. Subscribe for further authentic stories similar to this one, highlighting how quiet strength can be more impactful than force and justice can manifest in unexpected ways. Remember, you never know who you might encounter on the train.